because in Donald Trump's world, it's cake or brazen grift and corruption for him and his billionaire buddies, and the gallows for the little guy. New reporting by the New York Times finds that even as Donald Trump is issuing pardons to his wealthy friends and donors at rates we've never seen before for crimes like wire fraud, bank fraud, insider trading, and money laundering, Donald Trump is devoting his energy to targeting small dollar fraud. The Times writes this, quote, as the White House expands its war on fraud, the Justice Department announced criminal charges in recent days against a new symbol of that battle, a food truck in Santa Ana, California. The new emphasis on small dollar fraud comes as the administration has issued pardons and commutations to white-collar convicts pulled back from pursuing criminal cases against multinational corporations and dropped high-profile charges against wealthy executives. One former federal prosecutor telling the New York Times that a food truck, quote, is not the kind of case you would typically see federal law enforcement resources being poured into. And that's resources being pulled from other areas. We're not seeing an increase in fraud prosecutions involving public companies, investment frauds, and the more traditional Wall Street prosecutions typically pursued by the Justice Department. Donald Trump letting his friends and donors off the hook isn't just making his friends and donors richer, it's making all of us poorer in the process. In one analysis by the California governor's office earlier this year, they find that, quote, victims and the public won't get back the nearly $2 billion that courts had ordered those criminals to pay as part of their sentences, or were considering ordering when the pardons came in. And the Trump administration isn't stopping there. Axios reports this. The Treasury Department this week scrapped a key part of the federal anti-corruption law, the Corporate Transparency Act, that required anonymous shell companies and other firms to disclose their owners. All of this is a part of Donald Trump's effort to transform the American economy. As one writer in The Atlantic puts it, quote, his administration has worked relentlessly to topple America's anti-corruption infrastructure, eliminating task forces dedicated to combating dirty money, killing the enforcement of anti-bribery statutes, and gutting efforts to force the wealthiest Americans to pay their fair share of taxes, among countless other measures. The demolition of the Corporate Transparency Act is just the latest and most dramatic move to cater to the president's deep-pocketed buddies and fellow cronies, but it surely won't be the last. Donald Trump working overtime to transform America into a country by and for the oligarchs is where we begin today with some of our favorite experts and friends. Former Assistant Special Agent in charge at the FBI, National Security and Intelligence Analyst Michael Feinberg's here. Also joining us, Puck News Senior Political Columnist and National Affairs Analyst John Heilman is here. Also joining us, former Department of Justice Pardon Attorney Liz Oyer is here. She's now the host of the podcast, Is This Really Legal? Michael Feinberg, I start with you. It is extraordinary when you take all this reporting together, because you could look at one pardon and it could be a massive example of white-collar crime or fraud, of the defrauding of investors, Madoff style. But you take all these things next to each other and it is a clear, it is a deliberate, it is a brazen, it is a deeply politically unpopular, it is a very anti-capitalistic policy to fold into your economy corruption, fraud, and criminality. And I wonder what you make of the long and short-term damage being done.
The damage is immense, and unfortunately, like so many things that this administration is doing, undoing it will take orders of magnitude longer than it took to destroy. Look, there's a couple things going on here. The first and most obvious one is that this administration pursues policies to benefit the socioeconomic class to which most of the policymakers belong. But I'm going to say the quiet part out loud here. If you look at the sort of small-scale fraud they are now solely pursuing, whether it's against daycares in Minneapolis or food trucks in Southern California, I'm willing to bet that if you did another sort of demographic breakdown and analysis, you would find that this is just one more piece of the administration's general preference to go after minorities at the expense of going after people who are actually damaging the country. The notion that you would go after a daycare or a food truck or something else with a relatively small economic footprint and no tentacles that reach into other criminal organizations while giving a pass to major corporations that might actually be committing large-scale fraud or enabling embezzlement and money laundering is insane. And I can't find any legitimate motive for it.
What can you say about all of the capabilities that are being either purged from the Department of Justice, redirected inside the Department of Justice, and how long it takes to sort of get those wheels grinding again in these kinds of complicated investigations? I mean, Enron becomes such a flashpoint because it's so hard to topple and take on a company like Enron. Just talk about all of the brain drain.
Yeah, let's not forget, when Enron was prosecuted, it required the establishment of a specialized task force involving multiple government agencies that spent years sorting through the detritus and dregs of that company in order to make an effective prosecution and get justice, or at least as much justice as could be gotten for its victims. That's going to be exponentially more difficult the next time something like that happens, because this Department of Justice, whether we're talking about the main RFK building or its criminal investigative subcomponents like the FBI, they've jettisoned literally centuries of cumulative subject matter expertise and experience. You can't just replace toughened, experienced prosecutor or a seasoned investigator with somebody who just graduated from law school or Quantico. Becoming experienced by necessity involves having experiences. And when you're pushing people out simply because you want to replace them with loyalists, you lose all that. And it's going to take years to rebuild.
Liz, I wanted to set up the gutting of the sort of corporate fraud investigation unit next to the pardons, because taken together, they really are this two sides of the coin, right? It's not just criminal conduct on a scale vast enough to damage countless ordinary people not being investigated. It's the people who were investigated, who were convicted by juries of their peers, or who settled, acknowledging guilt, being pardoned if they happen to be political allies.
Yeah, the pardon power has become completely corrupted under Donald Trump. Essentially, he has wielded it to decide that the laws don't apply to certain types of people in whom he sees something of himself. He has actually granted pardons now to 3 corporations, which is literally unprecedented. There is no known example of any other president actually pardoning a corporation. He has also used the pardon power primarily to benefit wealthy individuals who have committed large-scale financial crimes and who owe tremendous amounts of money either to the victims of their crimes or to taxpayers. Donald Trump has walked away from prosecutions of those individuals using the pardon power, and his Justice Department has repeatedly dismissed major cases against wealthy individuals. The most recent example of that I've been following is an individual named Gautam Adani, who is one of the wealthiest men in the world. This week, charges were dismissed related to foreign bribery and fraud. His net worth is over $80 billion, and he apparently, according to reporting by numerous outlets, offered the Justice Department $10 billion, said that he would invest $10 billion in the United States in exchange for these charges being dismissed. The prosecutors said that's not why they ultimately dismissed them, but at the end of the day, the charges were dismissed against this incredibly wealthy individual over the objections of career prosecutors and investigators, and seemingly only because he had the ability to support and assist Donald Trump in his political agenda in some way, which is a total corruption and abuse of the discretion of the Justice Department.
Liz, weigh in on Michael Feinberg's point about the cases that do seem to be getting department resources and leading to investigations and prosecutions are, in this example, a food truck. Another example that J.D. Vance talks about a lot is, I think, daycares in the state of Minnesota. Talk about the things that are being targeted.
Yeah, the prosecutorial priorities of this administration are just overtly entrenching disparities that have long existed in the federal criminal justice system. I was a federal public defender for about 10 years, and the majority of my clients were low-income people of color. And those people have always experienced the unfairness of the criminal justice system because of disproportionate targeting with prosecutions and because of having less resources to defend those cases. This administration has essentially doubled down on those disparities, which other administrations have tried to alleviate and ameliorate through prosecutorial policies. But Donald Trump does not care one bit about who he is targeting disproportionately and how his prosecution policies affect communities of color, low-income communities, communities with large immigrant populations. I mean, those are the people that he ultimately does not care about at the end of the day, and he is pursuing political objectives by disproportionately prosecuting people in those communities, while wealthy, white business owners and people who look like Donald Trump are going free for very serious crimes that have very serious consequences